But I wanted to get into the Fed overreach and all that stuff because we briefly mentioned James O'Keefe. Guys, I got a conspiracy theory for you.
Oh, boy.
Yes.
You ready for a conspiracy theory?
I love conspiracy.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think you will agree with me on the plausibility of this conspiracy theory.
Alex is a Fed.
No,
No, not that one.
that
were right
James
all along.
O'Keefe was investigating the FBI, so they raided him to try and seize the evidence.
Yes, of
I think
course.
Let me
you're
lay
onto
let me lay out my case.
Oh, this
The
is a
New-
no-brainer.
The
Yeah.
The FBI raids James O'Keefe and Project Veritas, and James himself and his home and his journalists. They claim it's over some diary that he turned over to the law enforcement a long time ago. So this is what are they searching for? A diary he gave away already? Okay. Within an hour or so of the raid, the New York Times calls for comment on some of these journalists, meaning someone tipped off the New York Times. Information, electronic devices were seized from James O'Keefe. Privileged legal communications were then leaked to the New York Times. It is widely believed the FBI were leaking privileged communications to the New York Times. The New York Times stated that in those communications, James O'Keefe was discussing with his lawyer the extent to which they could undercover record federal law enforcement. On October 20th, I believe it was, an FBI whistleblower sent documents to the Republicans outlining how Merrick Garland was using counter-terror tactics against parents.
Right.
The FBI must have found out, and this is my theory, my hypothesis, that they had a leaker within the Bureau, and that James O'Keefe, I believe they knew someone was communicating with him, but they didn't know what
Who?
he was
Yeah,
given.
yeah.
So they said, we can't let him release this. So they raided him under false pretext, seized his communications. Activists within the Bureau said, give it to the New York Times and destroy them. That's my theory.
I would even add that they probably were the ones that gave him the diary in the first place, since this diary was going around, and they didn't expect
honey trap.
Yeah, they didn't expect them to give it to law enforcement, which Project Veritas did. They didn't run with the story, and I just think they were extremely desperate.
This isn't even a conspiracy theory at this point, I don't think. This all makes perfect sense to me. Like the fact that this got leaked when it did, the fact that they raided his house, the fact that he didn't even have the diary, but they assumed he would because I guess that's what they would have done if they'd been in his position. This doesn't sound like a conspiracy theory to me. This just sounds to me like what happened.
An October, so I don't know when the leak happened, so this is a correction. Fox News reports an October 20th internal email from the FBI's Criminal and Counterterror Divisions released Tuesday by House Republicans instructed agents to apply the threat tag EDU officials to all investigations and assessments of threats directed specifically at education officials. Could it be, and this is, I'll issue an update and correction, it wasn't that the FBI whistleblower sent the information on the 20th. What if this FBI whistleblower went to Veritas first? Following the raid by the FBI earlier this month, the whistleblower then brought it to the Republicans.
Interesting.
I think the FBI went after James O'Keefe because they were scared that O'Keefe had information on them. And I will stress, the New York Times said in the legal communications that Veritas was asking about the extent to which they could secretly record FBI agents.
Yeah, I think this is legit, dude. I mean, it's still a conspiracy theory.
Speculative.
I gotta say it because there's
Technically
no
speculative.
evidence, or well, there's some. I guess you could call it evidence, but there's no proof in any way. So we're still theorizing. But I mean,
James
geez,
knows.
that's what the FBI does.
James would know.
Didn't they in James might know when didn't they set up the whole, what was it, the Michigan governor?
Yeah,
that
Governor
thing?
Whitmer. Yeah.
The
that's
FBI
right.
plainly, like, I don't know if they admitted to it or what, but they were like causing that to happen. You have.
And with before social media, if this was 20 years ago, all of this would sound
never know.
ridiculous and crazy.
Yeah.
Well, and now there's enough evidence in a paper trail that people are like, all right, this is plausible.
Well, 20 years ago, we had the FBI scandal with the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, which also put them in a very questionable situation. So when you look at the history of the FBI, COINTELPRO, and all the other things that they have done, there's a long history of doing things that were absolutely illegal in the name of fighting the law.
Right.
So this is nothing new what the FBI has been up to throughout their entire existence anyway.
This is a scary and nightmarish reality. You know, it's like we were in the Matrix the whole time. You know, you're talking about how 20 years ago we wouldn't have figured this out, but the internet basically, for lack of a better term, red pilled everybody.
Yes.
And now they're all watching it happen from the outside, like, oh dear Lord, this is horrifying.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like the humanity's been under the boot since the beginning, and then the founding fathers were like, yo, the war, they didn't actually, well, Washington fought, but that sacrifice to kind of get us out from under the boot. But at what point did they put
They
the
all
boot?
sacrificed. They all did. Each and every
Ben
one of
Franklin's
them. All
son
of
joined
them.
the British.
Oh, of course
All-
they sacrificed. Yeah.
They staked their, what did they say? Their blood, their treasure, and their sacred honor or whatever.
Yes.
Yeah.
There was one founding father's wife was taken prisoner to be used in a prisoner exchange. A good majority of their homes were under British occupation.
And shout out to
But
all the
just think-
founding mothers, man.
Just think about
Yeah.
this.
Especially
A
Betsy.
the signers of the Declaration of Independence who sat down and could have just went, guys, it's a tax, it sucks, but I want to make sure my kids have food, so I'm not going to war. And I will throw it to Mel Gibson in one of the best movies ever, The Patriot, where he says,
Is that the one where he was with the beaver?
the Beaver?
Oh, no.
The
No.
Patriot
Okay.
it's a long
Sorry.
movie about him getting revenge for the British soldiers killing his
Oh,
kid.
okay.
Amazing movie. And he's in South Carolina. He's in, I think, Charleston. And he says, if you're asking me if I think taxation without representation is wrong, I agree with you. But if you're asking me to go to war with England, I say no. And then the British go to his house seeking rebel soldiers. He's tending aid to all of them. And his son was a writer for the American revolutionaries. So he's like, who is this man? Who are these orders? And then Mel Gibson's, one of his kids, got a bunch of kids, runs to try and save the older brother who's being arrested. And the British officer shoots and kills him.
Right.
Mel Gibson then uses his American frontier war training and goes on like a one-man, not a one-man, he has like a group of militiamen, and he goes and starts raiding the British. But anyway, I digress. That was an excellent scene where you see a guy who doesn't want to fight. He doesn't want to go to war. Then I think back to the founding fathers and what really happened. They all said from young ages of 26 to like 50s or whatever, I will say to the king, I declare war on you. And you know what's funny? You know what's really funny? And I say funny and not in the ha-ha way. They knew, they believed we'd lose. The founding fathers thought war with Britain would never play off and they would lose. But the French intervention saved us. So these were guys who were like, I am so pissed off at them quartering in our homes, taking our belongings, telling us we can't defend ourselves, that I am willing to say I will fight you and lose.
Yep.
Even if it means my children.
And
And
the
at the
other thi-
time, England had the biggest military in the world. They were the biggest might. They were the biggest power. And that movie, along with Braveheart, tells a very similar story.
Yeah.
Absolutely has your
Mel
blood
Gibson.
pumping and motivates you, and it really shows you the larger consequences of what is routine in human history. And it's not an exception to the rule. It is the rule.
And the other thing that they're not taught in a high school civics class is what a huge percentage of the American population were loyalists.
That's right.
That they wanted
Yeah.
nothing to do with this nonsense. We're loyal British subjects. Shut the F up, George Washington. Leave us alone. We're not revolutionaries. This is crazy.
Yeah.
So victory is never a function of persuading the majority. They're always going to follow the leaders.
So I've tried to do I've done a decent amount of research, not a historian, probably people know better than me, on the percentages of. So yeah, I've looked into it. There's a famous misconception where I think it was Ben Franklin. Someone said a third are loyalists, a third are want independence, and a third want to be left alone. But that's not actual numbers. So I looked it up, and the best assessment I could find is that the plurality wanted nothing to do with anyone. The plurality said, "Shut up and leave me alone and go away." The next largest group was in like the 30 percentile, which said we want independence, and then in the high 20th, percentages were people saying long live the king.
Yeah, loyalists.
All that mattered was those who actually cared. So the people who were uninitiated and said leave me alone abstained. The revolution won the vote, basically. And the other question about this is really interesting. When it came to voting on whether to declare independence, a lot of colonists were British. They all considered themselves British.
Yeah.
They said, by what authority do you declare independence in the name of our state?
Yeah.
They said, who elected you to go there and say you're a representative of the free state of Virginia? They just did this. They were like ad hoc pop-ups of people being like, we hereby declare. And then they sent the letter to the king, and the king was like, but people need to understand is the revolution was over 20 years. The British regulars were coming here and getting into conflicts and doing riot control and getting shot at and shooting back for decades. So it wasn't just one day they said, we hereby declare independence, here's a letter, and then the king said, send in the troops. The troops were there. They were fighting. And then within, I think it was like 1865 is when sentiment started rising and we started seeing conflicts.
1865?
1765. And then 1776 is when they're like, we are now asserting our independence outright. Over 20 years, this process took place. And then it was, another decade or so before the Bill of Rights?
You're right.
So it was a long
But it's also
time.
funny when it's like the king gets the declaration. He's like, "That's it. I'm sending in the troops." Like 1 month later, because he got to wait for them to cross the Atlantic.
No, but check this out. I talk about this quite a bit. They all gather. So all these founding fathers are sending letters to each other, and it takes a few weeks for the
Right.
letter to arrive in Virginia and then to go back. So the communication around independence is taking years. They have their Continental Congress, they have their meetings, and they say, okay, we're going to send a letter to the king with our list of demands, because they sent demand letters first, several. How long did it take to get back to the king? 3 months by sail? Then the king responds 3 months later. So 6 months
That's
for
why it
one
took 20
question.
years.
Yeah.
One question. And then a year goes by, and then I'm thinking, I've talked about how funny it is. He's like, Thomas Jefferson says, "We hereby declare independence." Ha ha. He fold it up, hand it to the guy. He gets on his horse. He rides to the boat. Everyone goes back to work. They go farm, and they forget all about it. And then a year later, a boat arrives, and they're like, "Look, big British vessels are coming, and they're angry with us
Yeah.
for some reason."
Oh yeah, that letter. God damn it, Hancock.
It's like no. Thomas Jefferson is like, he's like, did I send a letter last night? I was drunk.
We were all drunk. I was with Sally in the barn.
What day did that get
The
mailed
regulars
out?
show up. They're bombarding the coast, and they're like, "Remember that night a year ago when we all got drunk?" And we're like,
Vaguely.
I think we should be
Very
independent.
vague.
I'm gonna write a letter. Yeah, you write a letter to the king. And you tell him, and they all sign it, and they're like, "Cheers!"
I can't even read your signature.
Wait, you actually mailed it? That was supposed to be a joke.
I thought you burned
We were just letting off steam.
Right. You're supposed to not send you write the letter, but don't send it.
Yeah.
That's the therapy session. I'm just imagining the king like 3 months later gets the Declaration of Independence,
what is this?
and he's like, they've already been acting as an independent country for 3 months.
Yeah.
You know, so then he's like, okay, I guess go quell the revolution.
And then he's like, "What a coincidence! This would be dated the same day as Independence Day."
That's
Yeah,
right.
That's so strange.
That was the weirdest
Yeah.
part.
Yeah, that's
That was the
weird
weirdest part.
yeah.
My understanding is that Independence Day was July 2nd.
Right.
Nice.
Yeah.
Why did we choose the
I don't
fourth?
remember. There's like this like trivia thing they say. Did you know
3-day
that
holiday.
the signing was the 2nd, but it wasn't until like they.
Oh, didn't they have to wait for a couple signers or something?
I don't remember.
know,
I think it
whatever.
was like they mailed it out,
Ah.
on the 4th or whatever, or something like that. So I don't know if that's true, but I remember reading that there was a quote from like John Adams where it's like, July 2nd will be the day that America declared independence, and it's July 4th.
So if we have the boot on the neck now, kind of riding the metaphor, is it like the global banking system? And we're like, we will use Bitcoin and all crypto, and that's our way of saying we don't respect your authority, King George?
Yeah, I would say so for sure.
The-
Crypto,
the-
not using fiat money.
Yeah, I think people need to realize that as much as we can talk about the founding fathers saying like hurrah and then taking up arms, we're not in that era anymore. First of all, we're joking about the time gap between sending a message. Now you can literally be like, yo, we declare independence, MF or haha, and like they'll get it
Anything's
instantly.
trigger, it all happens.
And then
Everything's
they'll nuke
ready
it,
to
and
go.
they'll, like EMF your phone. And,
Yeah, everything
But
starts to trigger. And
Fifth generational warfare is the most important point. The liberty-minded individuals, whatever you want to call this group, have been winning because we've been very persuasive and peaceful. When Black Lives Matter rioted, Black Lives Matter lost tons of support among
Yeah.
the politically uninitiated. When we start winning hearts and minds and change the culture, that's how we actually win. And you don't win by freaking people out with violence. Violence is wrong.
So what effect did January 6th have on people? Not the media.
It
but
empowered
actual
the federal
event.
government to create a national Capitol Police force and torture people.
Right.
And you get 80 million people going like, oh no, an insurrection. And
Full of
these
crazy
politically
people,
uninitiated
yeah.
buy into it. So I often tell people, there's this funny episode of Frasier I saw a long time ago. I don't watch Frasier, but it was when I was a kid, where something happens where Frasier is sitting down for coffee. He gets up. Someone takes his seat. He gets angry and says, this is my seat. I was sitting here. And the guy says, shove off. Frasier, having a bad day, grabs him and throws him out of the seat.
Whoa.
Yeah, very angry.
Wild.
So the guy comes back one day with like a neck brace, and he's like, I'm suing you because you accosted me. And then Frasier's like, oh no, this is a big lawsuit. At the end of the episode, he's at the cafe trying to apologize to the guy. I could be getting the show wrong, but the gist of it is here. He's trying to apologize to the guy, saying, look, I shouldn't have done that to you. I'm really, really sorry. Please drop the suit. And the guy says no. And then Niles, Frasier's brother, gets up in between and says, you listen here, you cretin. You don't do that, to my brother, you imbecile. And so the guy says, no, you listen to me. And then pokes his chest lightly. And then Niles goes, whoa, whoa, and falls over and slams into a table full of like silverware. And he goes, countersuit.
Perfect.
And then the guy drops his lawsuit. The point of that story is
Niles goes to federal prison.
no,
I'm just- I don't
no, the guy attacked him. He was like, I didn't do anything.
Yeah.
And they're like, we all
pushed
saw
him.
you touch him.
Yeah.
You pushed him. So when you look at what's going on with Antifa violence, We might be upset that the feds aren't charging these people, but rest assured, regular Americans saw all of that, and one by one, they started figuring out what was going on. Now, the media narrative was strong, and a lot of people didn't realize the truth about the Rittenhouse case. But now we're seeing the Young Turks. We're seeing Chris Hayes. We're seeing progressives.
Chris Hayes too?
Chris Hayes said, in all likelihood, he said, I've been looking at the case, and it looks like an acquittal in all honesty.
Yeah.
Wait, just because he's predicting acquittal doesn't mean he thinks the guy's not guilty.
No. I'm not saying he said Rittenhouse is not guilty. I'm saying his attitude is now he's going to get acquitted versus he's this, it's a lightening on the narrative.
Got it. Okay.
And a Kasparian said I was wrong about what happened.
Okay.
Progressives are tweeting, I didn't realize what had actually happened. So the more we're persuasive, the more we're correct.
And the more that the corporate press is dishonest.
Yes.
Because if there's a big asymmetry, I make this point all the time. If I tell you, Tim, my friend, like 10 truths and 1 lie, those are not equal weight. Especially if the lie is this egregious when there's this kid on trial who's 17 years old who's crying, and then you're laughing at his PTSD.
That's right. So I think I think most people want safety, security, peace. They want to live their lives. They want to pursue their goals. And they're not really interested in politics. And so when they see the mainstream media, the corporate press say X, Y, and Z, they say, yeah, X, Y, and Z, I get it. But then one day, X, Y, and Z don't equal 1, 2, and 3, and they start getting confused.
Yes.
And it keeps piling on and piling on and piling on. But when you get a January 6th, that reinforces the narrative from the corporate press, from the cathedral and the establishment. So we need to make sure if we are saying 10 things and we are all honest individuals trying our hardest, but we get one wrong, people will say, oh, they made some bad predictions, but the stuff they said I found out to be true. The media is an inversion of this.
Yes.
They say 10 things and 9 things are wrong, and people finally get fed up and say, this is BS, they're lying to me. And then they say, I come to you for a solution.
Yeah.
So we were talking about how you would weight something like a moral weight, whether someone does something bad. And Luke brought up Henry Kissinger. And I was going to say one of the things that we should take into account is whether or not this is a pattern. And I would say that this is the same case with the media. If they're making a pattern of lying to us egregiously about everything all the time, and then they decide maybe they might throw in a truth every now and then,
Yes.
we can say, you are full of nonsense.
So what ends up happening? Those uninitiated individuals who aren't paying attention are starting to ask questions about why their gas is so high.
Yep.
Why they can't buy turkeys, because the price of turkey is double.
And why are you telling me this is a good thing?
Right.
Right?
Or this is a rich people problem.
Oh, yeah.
And then what happens? A truck driver in New Jersey wins his election against the incumbent Democrat after only spending $153, because we're getting to the point where people will elect a ham sandwich over an establishment
This also
Democrat.
happened with Dave Ball when he took out Eric Cantor, the House Majority Leader at the time, that no one saw coming.
When was that?
That was when was that? That was during the Obama administration.
Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to see the full show, come back to this channel, youtube.com/TimcastIRL, Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., where you can leave comments and super chat, and we actually will read your comments on the show. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and if you want exclusive members-only content, segments you can't get anywhere else, go to timcast.com, become a member, and we even have full bonus episodes. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.